Tonight's events were also watched closely by the other parties. We heard from the Liberal Democrats and from Nigel Farage. Joining us now from Edinburgh is Humza Yousaf of the SNP. What did you think?
Well, I think actually the wide debate was conducted over social media. That's where I was following it. We had some Twitter reps up there. 300 members actually joined the SNP during the course of that debate. And I think people are coming towards the SNP in droves because they don't see any difference between the Tories and Labour. We saw the Tories and the Conservatives reiterate the cuts that they're going to inflict on the poorest in society. And Ed Miliband's fatal flaw was to accept further spending reductions and a renewal in Trident at a cost of £100 billion. Hardly a surprise that the SNP is doing so well and Labour is completely in the doldrums.
All right, David, what we also heard from Ed Miliband, of course, is he ruled out getting into the sort of auction on policy with Alex Salmond that Mr Salmond has been telling journalists he plans after the general election. So that was a bit of a rebuff, wasn't it?
Well, first of all, I noticed that Scotland was mentioned a number of times in the debate and has been mentioned for months and months, actually, for the last few months. It's quite a surprise that we weren't included in these debates, even though we've been talked about so much. But in terms of Ed Miliband, a coalition was always unlikely. It's not something that we particularly wanted, not something that Labour want. But when it comes to an issue-by-issue vote or confidence in supply, if Ed Miliband is ruling that out, then he's stepping aside to let David Cameron, a Tory Prime Minister, back into number 10. That would be the final nail in New Labour's coffin, not just in Scotland, but I suspect the entire United Kingdom.
But it might be a position of principle which would take away quite a lot of the leverage which the SNP is telling the whole of the UK that it would have.
Well, if his principle is that we're the same as the Tories and I'd rather have a Tory Prime Minister in as opposed to putting forward and working with a party that has a progressive agenda. And remember, that's all we're talking about, a very progressive agenda that would see modest increase in public spending so we can spend in our public services, invest in our people, not to renew Trident at a cost of £100 billion when our poorest are suffering, and also to, of course, for Scotland to fulfil the vow and the promises that were made in the run-up to the referendum campaign. If he's ruling that out as a point of principle, I would rather be joined to the hip with a Tory Prime Minister and allow a Tory Prime Minister, David Cameron, back into number 10. It's probably the last principle he'll ever have.
OK, if you had to choose, though, I appreciate they're not your leader or the leaders of parties with which you have any sympathy, but who do you think did best tonight, Cameron or Miliband?
Well, I think the polls show actually that there's barely any of them shaded it. I mean, which one is my preference to be Prime Minister? It's like asking, I don't want a poke in the eye or a kick in the groin. I don't want any of them because I think they're putting forward the same austerity agenda. So I don't think any of them won. I think actually the people of Scotland are seeing that the SNP is putting forward a progressive agenda, hence why we're doing incredibly well in the polls, and that's why I hope and I'm pretty sure that we're going to win the general election here in Scotland.
Did Ed Miliband look tougher than you expected?
All right, yeah, but I heard him punch the air and shout, "Hell yeah!" It sent a real shiver up my spine. But I didn't think he was. I didn't think it's about who's tougher and who's not tougher. I don't think we should just be making politics into a game of macho wrestling. I mean, it's not about who's tougher. It's about who's putting forward policies that are going to help the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society, as well as give us a prosperous economy. This kind of macho getting in the ring, I'm tougher than him, I'll take on Putin, I'll take on the leader of the free world, that actually doesn't appeal to a lot of people. I think what appeals to people is who's putting forward the policies that are going to help them, their families, create a more equal society and also a more prosperous society.
OK, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Of course, the SNP's leader will be taking place in the seven-way debate in a week's time. Thank you for joining us again.